Hi, I'm Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary?
The Bukavac monster. Ivan hated science class. He felt like dissecting animals was cruel and there were other ways to learn about anatomy. When his teacher, Mr. Johnson, insisted that Ivan cut up the frog with the rest of the class, Ivan couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he discreetly shoved the frog in his backpack and took it home with him. His lab partner, Alejandra, covered for him, since she also had no desire to dissect a formerly living thing. At lunch, they met up in the bathroom and took the frog out of Ivan's backpack. But looking closely, they noticed it had 2 extra legs. Ivan decided to name it Gaston. He knew the frog was dead, but decided he would give it a proper burial at his house. It felt like the right thing to do after all. After school, Ivan dug a hole in his backyard. He said a prayer for Gaston, putting him in a tiny box, and buried him. He placed some flowers from his garden on top of the pile of dirt. Ivan was restless that night. Usually, he fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow, and not waking up until the alarm would go off. Instead, he tossed and turned all night in between dreams of being chased by frogs. He finally gave in around 6 a.m., feeling groggy and grumpy. He decided to check the site before he headed to school and noticed that the dirt surrounding Gaston's grave had been disturbed. He thought that was very strange, but assumed it was a nosy wild animal and would take a closer look after school. That evening, while Ivan was in his bedroom doing homework, he heard a strange noise coming from his closet. He cautiously made his way towards the sound. He opened the door slowly. He didn't see anything. Then the noise sounded again, and there on the floor was Gaston. He was staring at Ivan with icy blue eyes. Ivan was in shock. The creature had been dead when it was given to him in class, and he buried it. He called the only person who would believe him, Alejandra. Alejandra rushed over to have a look and confirmed that this was the frog from class with the 2 extra legs. She then pulled out her phone and Googled the frogs with extra limbs. The first thing to come up was the Handbook of Slavic Folklore. Within the same link, she learned about the Bukavac and found an image that looked just like Gaston. The ancient creature was a demonic monster with icy blue eyes, 6 limbs, and horns that killed everything in its way. Then, it exploded, giving birth to hundreds of tiny Bukavacs. Alejandra explained to Ivan that they needed to get rid of this creature immediately. As she bent down to scoop up Gaston, she felt a burning sensation on her fingers. Before she could drop the frog, they watched in horror as the skin on her hand melted off. Alejandra screamed in pain before passing out. While Ivan grabbed a towel and threw the monster out the window, Alejandra spent hours at the hospital getting skin grafted onto her hand. Ivan went home and slept for hours due to exhaustion. When he awoke, staring across from him was Gaston. Except this time, Gaston was the size of a bowling ball, with horns on his head. He also had something furry sticking out of his mouth. As Ivan slowly made his way towards Gaston for a closer look, he gagged and jumped back in horror. It was the paw of his orange cat. Ivan's parents appeared at his door when they heard the commotion. And much to his horror, he noticed that their eyes were now the same icy blue color as Gaston's. Just as Ivan's mother asked him what was wrong, a gnat flew by, and she extended her tongue far beyond its normal reach and gobbled it up. His parents had somehow become hosts for whatever creature Gaston was. He realized he needed to kill Gaston in order to get his parents back to themselves. He ran to the kitchen to grab a knife, then raced back upstairs where he stabbed Gaston repeatedly, leaving severed body parts all over his room. His parents collapsed onto the floor, their eyes still blue, but now lifeless. Ivan shook his mom, but it was no use. She was gone. As he cried out in grief, he started to hear croaking again. Gaston reappeared. He was now the size of a large dog. He looked into Ivan's eyes. opened his mouth and swallowed Ivan's dad whole. He then leapt onto Ivan's chest, pinning him to the floor. Ivan's skin started to burn. He struggled for his breath, but the frog was too strong. Ivan was consumed limb by limb. A few days later, the police showed up after getting calls about a bullfrog infestation in the neighborhood. Ivan and his parents were nowhere to be found. The only person who knew the truth was Alejandra, but nobody believed a 13-year-old, so the Bukavac was never caught. It remains out there hungry, waiting. They say on still evenings, you can hear a dull croaking, intended to lure its next victim into the shadows.